Most people think if I'm a good consumer, I compare prices, research my purchases ahead of time. But the truth is, what we buy doesn't just affect us, it can affect the environment, illegal child labor, even terrorist groups. Randy Charles Epping is the author of The 21st Century Economy, a Beginner's Guide, and is an expert on being a smart global consumer. It is so nice to have you here.
Thanks, Kim.
We should point out, this isn't just about helping you understand the economy today. It gives you tools and helps you kind of navigate what could happen, the good and the bad. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we do every day as consumers. We hear the buzzword now about buying green, buying smart. Let's talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot to know about this, right?
Absolutely. You know, as you said, the consumers are being asked to make these huge decisions, and we're just not being given the information. And, you know, green being an example. They have this idea of carbon footprints.
Right.
You know, everything you do leaves a trace. And if you buy something at your local store, that has a cost in terms of carbon. It's a truck that brought it to the store, how it was produced. And consumers tend to sort of think local, that they think local is good, so that if you buy something from the area, actually you're using less carbon. Your carbon footprint is a lot smaller than it would be as if you imported something from abroad. It's absolutely not the case.
Well, let's talk about another area where a lot of people are also changing the way that they shop. And I know a lot of my friends do this. They buy fair trade. It's important to buy fair trade. And some people may not understand exactly why it's important to do that.
Right. Fair trade is one of these certifications, and there are many out there that we consumers can use to sort of get an idea if the workers that have produced this product, if they've been treated fairly. The problem, though, is how do you define fair? One of the classic examples is, you know, if you go and buy a sports shoes and you say that, well, the people who made these are in Guatemala, or they're in Vietnam, or they're in China, they're only earning $1 or $2 an hour. That's unfair. And so we tend to not buy those and maybe buy something that's even more expensive, or maybe not even really what we want, because we think we're doing a favor to the person who's not being treated fairly. When in fact, if you go to Guatemala, I was just in Brazil last week, you go to Asia and you see that the people who are working in American shoe factories admittedly are earning a lot less than Americans, but they're earning probably twice as much as they would if they were out working in the fields. In Guatemala, for example, the only other alternative to a shoe factory usually is to go out and work in the coffee plantations or the banana plantations, where you would earn half of what you would earn if you were working in the shoe factory. So we as consumers, we have to take sort of the global picture and not just say, not just go for the obvious answer. And that's why things like fair trade are a good example, but then in a way we have to take it one step further. You know, the idea of green, for example, to get back to the original question, is that, you know, if you buy flowers from your local store, you think, well, you know, it's obvious that they should be grown locally.
Right. But not necessarily the case.
Not necessarily the case. In cold climates, in the winter, for example, in Oregon or in Massachusetts or in Switzerland, where I live, you have to use an enormous amount of energy in greenhouses to grow those flowers. If you import them from Colombia, where they don't need to have any sort of extra energy use, the only energy is just actually putting them on a boat or a plane and bringing them here. That often is a lot less than the energy that's being used to grow them locally.
So you really have to educate yourself and really put your thinking cap on to understand how all of this is working. There is something important I want to touch on when it comes to shopping, and so many women especially do this in what they buy, and that is in fact that they buy these knockoff items.
Right.
And that is such a big deal in the economy and how it affects the global market, isn't it? And things that we really need to consider in that realm, right?
It is. You know, that the idea that you know, that whatever we buy, you have to sort of look beyond the curtain, look behind the curtain. And one of the ideas of my book, which is called a Beginner's Guide, the 21st Century Economy, a Beginner's Guide, is that we as beginners can actually understand these major concepts of the world economy.
Right. Don't let it be overwhelming to you.
And of course, the reason it is overwhelming is because economists tend to use all these big fancy words and equations, and we sit back and say, look, there's no way we can understand that. We let the politicians and the sort of activists make all these decisions for us, when in fact the whole idea of my book is to say the 21st century economy is a new animal. We actually have a lot of information. We who have everyday lives, we go to the store, we know what a budget is. You know, we know how foreign trade, for example, everyone says, you know, we don't understand it, so we have to just let the politicians make the decision. We can take simple everyday examples of how our daily lives are affected and then apply those on the international level. So things like knockoffs, or even if you buy counterfeit goods, which a lot of people tend to do, thinking, oh, well, it's the big companies, the big watchmakers, the purse manufacturers. Right. I'm going to buy a knockoff. I'm going to buy something that's counterfeit. It's not going to hurt anyone. When in fact, I did research. I wrote a novel a couple years ago, a financial thriller called Trust. And I did research for that and found out that there are groups, even terrorist groups like the Hezbollah, who use the counterfeit trade to make money and to launder money. So by you giving money, by buying something that is a counterfeit, if it's a DVD or if it's a handbag or a watch that you think, well, it doesn't hurt anyone, actually you're giving money to organizations that can use it, that absolutely work in your worst interest. That's another example, the fusion economy. I call it fusion economics. In fact, there's even a website, fusioneconomics.com, where I go over these things. It's all fused together, and the only way we're going to understand it is start sitting down and breaking it apart and pay attention to what's going on.
It's a good place to start and understand things, to learn more and help understand today's ever-changing economy. Pick up Randy's book, The 21st Century Economy, A Beginner's Guide. You'll learn a lot.
This has been BetterTV.com. For more stories like the one you just saw, catch the weekday television program Better, your source for styles, trends, relationships, beauty, fitness, and other stories that will help make your day better. Check local TV listings to see if Better airs in your city. Thanks for watching.